James Holloway's hands shook as he pressed 2 fingers against the frozen woman's throat, searching for a pulse he didn't expect to find. 3 years ago, he'd felt this same desperate hope when his wife Abigail stopped breathing after childbirth and lost. The blizzard screamed around him December 24, 1876, burying his Wyoming ranch in white death. His 8-year-old daughter Annie waited in the cabin behind him. This stranger's lips were blue. Her fingers curled stiff with frostbite. But there, faint as a dying man's prayer, her heart still beat. If this story grabs your heart, hit that subscribe button and stay with me till the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. Now let me take you back to that frozen Christmas Eve. The wind carried no mercy on Christmas Eve, 1876. James Holloway raised his lantern against the gathering dark, checking the fence line one last time before the blizzard buried everything. Wyoming territory stretched endless around him 40 miles west of Fort Laramie, where civilization thinned to nothing but snow and silence and the constant work of not dying. Temperature had dropped to 18 below, the kind of cold that didn't ask questions. Just killed. He was 36 years old, alone with his daughter, and the storm building overhead looked like it planned to stay 3 days. Maybe 4. Long enough to trap them inside. Long enough to test every preparation he'd made and punish every one he'd skipped. The shape in the snow stopped him cold. Not deer. Not shadow. Something wrong. 20 yards from the south fence, a dark mass against the white. Too still to be alive, positioned wrong to be dead. Jim's hand moved to the Winchester slung across his shoulder. 15 years on the frontier. 4 of them in Union blue during the war, 11 scratching survival from this unforgiving land, had taught him that hesitation killed more men than quick decisions ever would. He moved fast, boots crunching through knee-deep drifts, lanterns swinging wild, throwing shadows across the cottonwoods that lined his property. When he reached her, his breath caught hard. A woman, face down in the snow. One arm stretched forward like she'd been reaching for something. Help, maybe. Hope. Or just one more step before the cold took her down for good. Jim knelt fast, touched her shoulder. Ice clung to her dark auburn hair, transforming it into frozen ropes. Her lips showed that terrible blue tinge, fingers curled stiff. He pressed 2 fingers to her throat. The pulse was there, faint as a whisper, irregular as a broken promise, but there. Thank God. He didn't waste time on questions. Out here, you didn't ask before you acted. Cold killed faster than curiosity, faster than caution, faster than anything except a bullet. Jim wrapped his coat around her shoulders, worked his arms beneath her body, lifted. She weighed almost nothing, like the cold had already hollowed her out from the inside, taken everything but the shell. The cabin glowed 50 yards ahead, lamplight bleeding through the single window, promising warmth and safety, and the chance to undo whatever damage winter had inflicted. Annie stood in the doorway, small and blonde lamplight making a halo of her hair. "Papa." Her voice carried thin through the wind. "Is she alive?" "She's fighting," Jim called back, adjusting his grip, moving as fast as the snow allowed. "Open the door wide, sweetheart, and fetch every blanket we got." Annie disappeared inside. Smart girl, always thinking ahead. 8 years old and already more capable than most adults he'd known. Loss did that to children. Made them grow up faster than they should. Made them understand the fragility of everything. Made them careful in ways that broke his heart, even as it made him proud. He carried the stranger up the porch steps, through the threshold. Heat hit him like a wall. The fire roared in the stone hearth, Annie's doing, bless her, always anticipating needs before they were spoken. Jim laid the woman on the rug by the fire, close to the flames but not too close. Gradual warming. Anything else would do more harm than good. Her dress was torn at the hem. Town dress. not made for frontier travel for running through wilderness in December. Her hands were scratched, bloody, palms scraped raw. She'd been running through brush, running from something. The thought settled cold in his gut, colder than the wind outside. Annie appeared beside him, arms full of quilts. The ones Abigail had sewn before she died, before their son Thomas died, before everything ended 3 winters ago and left him alone with a daughter and memories that cut worse than any blade. "Papa, her hands are so cold." "Then we warm them." He pulled off the woman's frozen boots. 3 toes showed the telltale white of early frostbite. Survivable if treated right. Fatal if ignored. Jim wrapped her feet in wool, began rubbing circulation back into fingers that felt like wax under his calloused palms. "Fetch more wood, darling. Quick now." Annie ran. No questions, no hesitation, just trust. The kind of trust that made him ache with the weight of responsibility. He was all she had. If he failed, if he made one wrong choice, she'd be alone in a world that didn't care about 8-year-old girls with no family and no protection. He worked fast, tucking blankets tight, monitoring breathing, checking pulse every 30 seconds. The woman's skin felt colorless and slack, but her chest rose and fell, shallow but steady. Her eyelids fluttered once, twice. She looked at his face, at the firelight dancing on the log walls, at Annie returning with an armload of kindling struggling under the weight but determined to help. The woman's lips moved, shaping a word he couldn't hear. Then her eyes closed again. "She's not dying," Jim said, more to himself than Annie. "Not tonight, not on Christmas Eve." He built up the fire until it roared. Outside, the blizzard screamed against the walls, hurling snow and ice and fury at anything stupid enough to be caught in its path. Inside, 3 souls huddled by the light. 2 who lived there, and 1 who'd been delivered to their door like an answer to a prayer Jim hadn't known he'd spoken. "Toll." She woke to warmth. After 3 days of cold that ate through her bones and settled in her marrow, the heat felt like resurrection. A man sat near, broad shoulders silhouetted against the fire, weathered face carved with lines that spoke of grief and determination in equal measure, careful hands tending the flames. Not the men who'd chased her, not the killers. Safe. Kate Brennan tried to sit. Pain shot through her ankle like a lightning strike, and she gasped sharp, involuntary. The man turned. Quick movements, but gentle, economical, practiced. "Easy, ma'am. You've been through hell." His voice was low, steady, mountain voice. The kind that didn't waste words because words were precious, and silence was sometimes the only honest answer to an impossible world. He moved to her side, one hand supporting her back. She saw his face clearly now, mid-30s maybe. Grief carved into the lines around his eyes, permanent and deep. A wedding ring still on his finger, but the way he touched her, the careful distance he maintained, suggested widower, not married man. Men with living wives touched different. Her throat felt like sandpaper. "Where?" "My cabin, Wyoming territory, found you half frozen by my fence line." He reached for a tin cup, held it to her lips. The broth was warm, salty, probably saved her life. Kate drank, then pulled back, her mind starting to work again through the fog of hypothermia and exhaustion. "Thank you." Her voice came out rough. "I'm Kate Brennan. I'm a nurse. I was—" She stopped, remembering the wagon, the men, the running. "You don't need to explain tonight." The man set the cup down with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his size. "Name's James Holloway. Folks call me Jim. That's my daughter Annie." Kate looked up. A small girl peered down from a loft above, blonde braids framing a solemn face. 8, maybe 9 years old. Far too serious for a child that young. "Are you an angel?" the girl asked. Kate almost laughed, but the child's face was completely serious. No humor, just genuine curiosity mixed with something like hope. "No, sweetheart. Just a woman who got very lost. Papa prayed for help. Annie's voice carried absolute conviction. Maybe you're the answer. Jim's jaw tightened. Annie, come down here. Miss Brennan needs rest, not questions. The child climbed down the ladder with careful precision, each step deliberate. She wore a faded nightgown, feet bare despite the cold floor. When she reached the bottom, she walked straight to Kate and took her hand. Small fingers, warm and trusting. I'm glad you didn't die, Annie said simply. Something in Kate's chest cracked open. The directness of children. The unfiltered truth they spoke before the world taught them to lie or soften or hide. She squeezed the small hand. Me too. Jim cleared his throat. Storm's too heavy. You'll stay till it breaks. It wasn't a question. Just frontier hospitality mixed with the practical reality that sending her out would be murder. I'll check your ankle. He moved with practiced efficiency, fingers gentle but sure. When he touched the swelling, Kate winced despite herself. Sprained, not broken. He wrapped it with strips of clean cloth, hands steady. You've done this before, Kate said. My wife. His voice went flat, empty. Before she passed, and Annie when she broke her arm last spring. The past tense hung heavy between them. Kate saw it now. The empty space at the table. The wedding ring he still wore like armor. The careful way he avoided looking at her too long, as if prolonged eye contact might somehow betray the woman who wasn't there anymore. I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Holloway. You don't. He stood, moved back to the fire, putting distance between them. A man does what's right, or he ain't much of a man. Mercy ain't a choice out here. It's what separates the living from the dead, the human from the animal. Kate heard what he didn't say. It's what separates civilization from savagery. She'd learned that lesson 2-3 days ago watching Dr. Amos Thornton bleed out on a way station floor while 5 men divided stolen morphine and laughed about how easy it had been. Annie climbed into her father's lap, tucked her head under his chin. Jim held her automatically, his whole body softening in a way that transformed him from frontier hardness to something gentler. Father and daughter wrapped in grief and love, surviving in this small warm space while the world froze outside. Kate watched them across the firelight and understood she'd stumbled into someone else's carefully guarded sorrow. A father who'd lost his wife, a daughter who'd lost her mother. Both of them building walls against further pain. Both of them doing the work of survival without the luxury of healing. Outside the wind screamed. Inside, Kate Brennan realized she'd have to find a way to leave without making it worse. Without bringing the danger that followed her into this fragile sanctuary. Without destroying the only safe place she'd found in 3 days of running. But first, she had to survive the night. Kate woke before dawn. The cabin was dark, except for embers glowing red in the hearth. Jim slept by the fire, Annie curled against his side like a small blonde shadow. His arms circling her even in sleep. Protective. Always. Even unconscious, even exhausted, still guarding the one thing he had left to lose. She tried to shift, testing her ankle. It throbbed hot and swollen but held weight. Good. She could leave when the storm cleared. Wouldn't be a burden longer than necessary. Wouldn't bring her hunters to this door. To this man. To this innocent child who'd already lost too much. Jim's eyes opened. He saw her watching, sat up carefully so Annie wouldn't wake. Morning. His voice came rough with sleep. Morning. Kate pulled the quilt tighter against the pre-dawn cold. I can help with breakfast. Whatever you need. You should rest. I'm a nurse, Mr. Holloway. Sitting still drives me mad. The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Rare enough that it transformed his face for half a second, showing her what he might have looked like before grief carved permanent channels into his features. Coffee then, if you can stand. They moved through the small space quietly. Jim showed her where things were. Coffee. Skillet. The sourdough starter his wife had kept alive for 10 years. His hands hesitated on the jar just for a moment, then set it down harder than he meant. Abigail made bread every Sunday. He said her name like it hurt, like speaking it aloud was pulling shrapnel from an old wound. Taught Annie before she... He stopped. Picked up the bowl again, gentler this time. Before. Kate understood. Some sentences couldn't be finished. Some truths were too heavy to complete. The silence between words carried more meaning than language ever could. They worked without speaking. Kate sliced bread, Jim fried eggs. When Annie climbed down, yawning and rubbing sleep from her eyes, she found them both at the stove like they'd been doing this for years. Like this was normal. Like Kate belonged here instead of being a stranger who'd nearly died on their land less than 12 hours ago. Miss Kate stayed. Annie's voice held delight and wonder mixed in equal measure, as if she'd expected to wake and find the strange woman vanished like a fever dream. Just till the weather clears, sweetheart. Jim set plates on the table. Simple food. Frontier breakfast. But hot and plentiful, and served with a care that spoke of a man who understood the importance of small rituals in holding back chaos. After breakfast, Annie brought a small wooden frame to the table. Inside, a woman smiled. Dark hair, kind eyes, laugh lines deep as rivers. That's Mama. The child's voice held something between pride and sorrow. She died when I was 5. Kate's throat tightened. She was beautiful. Papa says she's with the angels now. Annie looked at her father, seeking confirmation for a belief she wasn't quite old enough to hold without help. But I think she gets lonely up there. Jim's face went hard as stone. He stood abruptly, chair scraping loud against the floor. I'll check the stock. He grabbed his coat, walked out into the cold without another word. The door shut like punctuation. Final, absolute. Conversation over. Annie climbed into Kate's lap without invitation, seeking comfort from a stranger because her father's grief left no room for questions about the dead. Papa gets sad when we talk about Mama. He loved her very much, Kate said softly. Do you got anyone who died? The directness again, no adult filtering, just honest curiosity about shared pain. My parents, when I was 16, they were traveling to California. Wagon overturned crossing Snake River. So you're alone too. Annie's small arms wrapped around Kate's neck. Not pity, just recognition. Like us. Through the window, Kate could see Jim standing in the snow, staring at nothing, shoulders rigid, fists clenched at his sides, fighting something internal and losing. A man trapped between honoring the past and surviving the present, unable to choose either without betraying the other. Can you stay till Christmas is really over? Annie whispered. Please. Kate knew she should say no. Knew staying would only make leaving harder, make the inevitable separation more painful for this child who'd already learned too young that people leave and don't come back. But she looked at the girl in her arms and at the man standing alone in the snow and couldn't form the words. If your father says it's all right. When Jim came back and stomping snow from his boots, Annie asked immediately, Can Miss Kate stay a little longer, Papa? Just till the trail's clear. He met Kate's eyes across the room. Something passed between them. Understanding maybe, or warning, or both. Weather won't clear for days anyway. His voice was carefully neutral, empty of inflection. You're welcome to stay. But his eyes said something else. I can't afford to need you. Don't make me need you. Don't make Annie need you. We've lost enough. Kate heard it all, understood it all, and stayed anyway. Because sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was accept shelter instead of running back into the storm. That afternoon, Kate mended Annie's torn rag doll while sitting by the window. Thread and needle moving in practiced rhythm, the kind of small repair work that kept frontier families clothed and functioning. Annie watched, fascinated by the neat stitches appearing like magic. "Mama used to sew," she said quietly. "Did she teach you?" Kate asked, not looking up from her work. "A little, before she got too tired." The words hung there. Too tired. The euphemism children used for dying because death was too big a word, too permanent a concept. Too tired suggested sleep, suggested rest, suggested the possibility of waking. Easier than the truth. Jim stood in the doorway watching them. Kate saw it from the corner of her eye. The way his shoulders loosened slightly, the way his breath caught when Annie laughed at something Kate said. For just a moment, the grief stepped back. Just a moment. Then he turned and walked outside again. Like staying would somehow betray the woman whose absence defined every corner of this cabin. That night, after Annie climbed to the loft, Kate sat by the fire. Jim worked at his bench in the corner, whittling something from pine. They didn't speak, but the silence wasn't empty. It held weight. Presence. The quiet acknowledgement of two damaged people occupying the same space without demanding anything from each other. Home ain't a place Kate thought watching him work, watching the firelight play across his face. It's the people you'd ride through hell to get back to. She'd been riding away from hell. But maybe, just maybe, she'd found something on the other side. Something fragile and temporary and dangerous to want, but real. Undeniably real. A cabin that felt like sanctuary. A child who looked at her with hope instead of suspicion. A man who'd saved her life without asking why she needed saving. Outside, wolves howled in the distance. Real wolves this time, not the human kind that had chased her through 3 days of snow. But Kate knew the human wolves were still out there. Still hunting. Still coming. The question wasn't if they'd find her. The question was when. And whether James Holloway would survive the violence she brought to his door. The knock came at dawn on the second day, December 26th. Jim's hand moved to his rifle before he was fully awake. Pure instinct from 15 years of frontier life, where the difference between caution and paranoia was measured in survival rates. "Easy, boy." The voice from outside was familiar, age tinged with amusement. "It's just old Toby." Visible relief crossed Jim's face. He opened the door to reveal a man in his late 60s, lean as jerky weathered as canyon rock. Colonel Tobias McCrae, retired cavalry officer, neighbor mentor. The closest thing to a father Jim had known since arriving in Wyoming territory. "Saw smoke from your chimney at odd hours." Toby stepped inside without invitation, tracking snow across the floor. "Figured something's wrong." His eyes found Kate immediately, sharp gaze taking in everything. The woman by the fire, the wrapped ankle, the town dress torn at the hem. The way Jim positioned himself between them, protective even of strangers. "Found a woman half frozen on my fence line Christmas Eve," Jim said carefully. "Been tending her till she can travel." "That's so." Toby moved closer, studying Kate with the analytical eye of a man who'd survived by reading situations fast and accurate. "She running from something?" "Don't know yet. Haven't asked." "Planning to tell him when she's ready to tell," Kate said quietly. Toby nodded slow approval. "Abigail raised you right, son." He knelt beside Kate, movement surprisingly fluid for his age. Former cavalry scout. Frontier survivor. Man who'd seen more death than most people could imagine, and somehow stayed human through it all. "Name's Tobias McCrae. Folks call me Toby." He checked her ankle with practiced efficiency. "Sprained, not broken. Week to heal, maybe 10 days. His fingers moved to her feet, unwrapping the wool. "Frostbite on 3 toes. Early stage. Keep them wrapped elevated. You'll keep all of them." He looked at her hands. The scratches. The defensive wounds. "And those ain't from falling. You fought through brambles, running." His eyes met hers. No judgment, just recognition. One survivor to another. "Fort Laramie," Kate said, meeting his gaze. "I was traveling to Cheyenne. Our wagon was attacked." "Attacked by who?" "I don't know. Bandits maybe. I ran." Toby didn't buy it. Kate could see that in his eyes. But he didn't push. Just nodded like he understood the need for partial truths when full truth was too dangerous to speak. Lucky you found Jim's place. Very lucky. Annie climbed down from the loft, saw Toby, and smiled for the first time since Kate had arrived. "Morning, Colonel Toby. Merry Christmas." "Morning, little bit." Toby's whole face transformed. 68 years old, but lighting up like a child at the sight of her. "Merry Christmas to you, too." "We didn't do Christmas this year," Annie said matter-of-factly. "But we got Miss Kate instead. Seems like a fair trade. Maybe better than presents." While Annie helped Toby with coffee, Jim and the old man stepped outside. Kate watched through the window. Two men in the snow, teacher and student. Toby talking, Jim listening. Both occasionally glancing back at the cabin. At her. When they returned 20 minutes later, Toby's face was grave. He'd said something that changed Jim's posture, tightened his shoulders, put his hand closer to his rifle. "Storm won't break for 3 more days, Toby announced. "Maybe 4. Nobody's traveling those trails till then." He looked at Kate. "Which means you're staying, and we're making preparations." "Preparations for what?" But Kate knew, could see it in their faces. "For whoever's looking for you," Toby said simply. "Because someone is, and they'll come eventually." "I should leave." Kate tried to stand. "I won't put you in danger." "Sit down." Toby's voice carried absolute authority. 68 years old, but still commanding cavalry scouts in his tone. "You leave, you die. Storm's too heavy, temperature's too low, you'd last an hour. Better me than them. That's not your choice to make." Jim spoke for the first time since they'd come back inside. His voice was flat, final. "You're under this roof. That makes you my responsibility. You don't owe me anything. This isn't about owing." He moved to the window, looking out at the endless white. "It's about what's right." Toby sat at the table, pulled Annie into his lap. "Tell me about this attack. The one on your wagon." Kate hesitated, then decided. These men had earned truth even if truth brought danger. "We were carrying medical supplies, morphine, legally shipped to Cheyenne Hospital. Stopped at a way station 2 days out from Fort Laramie." She took a breath. Remembered. 5 men were there. Brothers, I think. The leader was called Mal. Jim and Toby exchanged glances. They knew the name. That was bad. "Dr. Thornton, the doctor I was traveling with, he refused to hand over the morphine. Said it was federal medical supply. Protected." Her voice went hollow. "The man Mal shot him. No warning. No hesitation. Just shot him in the chest and watched him die." Annie gasped. Toby's arms tightened around her. "I was hidden in the supply wagon. Saw everything. When they were dividing the morphine, I ran. Took a horse road into the storm." "And they're hunting you," Toby said. Not a question. "I'm the only witness. I can identify all 5 men. I can testify. Put them on a gallows. They can't let me live." Silence fell heavy. Outside, the storm continued its assault. Inside, 3 adults and 1 child processed what this meant. What was coming? "How much ammunition you got?" Toby asked. 40 rounds for the Winchester, 20 for the Colt." "Not enough. I'll bring more tomorrow. Food too. You're going to be hosting longer than planned." "Toby, I can't ask you to." "You ain't asking, I'm telling." The old man stood, set Annie down gently. "Protecting the weak ain't weakness, son. It's what separates men from animals." He moved to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame, looked back at Jim. "But remember this. Wolves hunt in packs. 1 man alone can't hold against many." "Then I'll pray I don't have to be alone." Toby nodded, satisfied. "You won't be. I'll be here soon as weather allows." After he left, Jim stood at the window for a long time, watching the old man disappear into the white, watching the empty landscape where somewhere maybe 10 miles away, maybe 25 killers waited for the storm to break so they could finish what they'd started. "I'm sorry." Kate's voice was small. I've brought hell to your doorstep." Jim turned, looked at her for a long moment. Then at Annie, who was watching them both with those two old eyes. "Hell comes whether we invite it or not." He checked his rifle, ejected the magazine, checked the rounds. "Only question is whether we run from it or face it. You could turn me in, claim a reward maybe." "There's no reward. And even if there was," he met her eyes, "a man stands for what's right, or he ain't much of a man." Annie climbed down from the table, walked to Kate, took her hand. "We're a family now," the child said with absolute conviction. "Families don't give up on each other." Kate looked at Jim, saw him struggling with the words his daughter had spoken, saw the war between wanting to protect them and wanting to send her away, saw him choose. "She's right." His voice was rough. "You're staying. We'll face whatever comes together." "Why?" Kate whispered. "You barely know me." Jim was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, and his words carried the weight of absolute truth. "Because you make Annie smile. Because this cabin's been dead for 3 years. Because maybe God sent you here for a reason. And I'm done arguing with God." That night, after Annie slept, Jim sat by the fire cleaning his rifle. Kate sat across from him, hands folded in her lap. Neither speaking, but both feeling the weight of what was coming. "Tell me about your wife," Kate said softly. He looked up, surprised. "Why?" "Because Annie needs to remember her, and you need to say her name out loud sometimes." Long silence. Then Jim set down the rifle, looked into the fire, and spoke. "Abigail." Her name was Abigail. First time he'd said it without pain cutting his voice. She was strong, brave, could outshoot most men, had a laugh that made you want to laugh too, even if nothing was funny. "She sounds wonderful." She was. He picked up the cloth again, wiped the barrel with unnecessary thoroughness. "She died giving birth. Baby didn't make it either. Son, Thomas. He lived 3 hours. His voice cracked. "Just stopped breathing. Both of them. 3 years ago this winter." Kate moved closer, sat beside him, didn't touch, just present. "I'm so sorry." Some days I forget what her voice sounded like. The admission came out raw. Then I feel guilty for forgetting. Remembering her doesn't mean you're betraying her, Jim. He looked at her then, really looked. First time she'd said his name. It sounded different in her mouth, softer, like it meant something new. Toby said the same thing. "Because it's true." They sat in the firelight, two broken people finding unexpected comfort in shared grief. Outside wolves howled, real wolves this time. But human wolves were out there too, waiting, hunting, coming. And Jim Holloway, who'd spent 3 years trying to die slowly of loneliness, found himself wanting to live again, wanting to fight, wanting to protect this strange woman who'd stumbled into his life and reminded him what it felt like to have purpose beyond simple survival. The storm would break eventually. The killers would come. Blood would be shed. But tonight, in this moment, by this fire, 3 people who'd been alone too long found something worth fighting for. Family. Not by blood, by choice. And sometimes that made all the difference. The storm broke on the 3rd morning, December 27th. 3 feet of snow lay in drifts against the cabin walls, sculpted by wind into shapes that suggested frozen waves. The sky stretched endless and blue, deceiving in its beauty. Temperature had dropped to 22 below. The kind of cold that turned breath to ice before it left your lungs. Jim stood at the window, coffee steaming in his hands, watching the eastern tree line. Watching for movement that shouldn't be there. Watching for death approaching on horseback. Behind him, Kate helped Annie dress for the day. Their quiet conversation, a domestic sound this cabin hadn't heard in 3 years. The normalcy of it struck him like a blow. How quickly the human heart adapted. How easily 3 days could make a stranger feel like family. Toby arrived at 7, materialized out of the white like a ghost made solid, leading a packhorse loaded with supplies, ammunition, Food. Wire for perimeter bells. The preparations of men who knew violence was coming and refused to meet it unprepared. "Found something," Toby said without preamble, stomping snow from his boots. His face was grim. "Tracks. Single rider. Circled your property last night around midnight." Jim's hand tightened on his coffee cup. "How close?" 30 yards at nearest point. Stood by that big cottonwood watching your cabin for 20 minutes. Then rode east toward the road." "Scout?" "Scout." Toby pulled a strip of jerky from his coat, chewed thoughtfully. "They're confirming she's here. Counting how many guns you got. Planning their approach." Kate had gone pale. Annie clutched her hand, sensing the fear, even if she didn't understand its source. "How long?" Jim asked. "Day, maybe 2. They'll wait for easier travel, but not much longer." Toby looked at Kate. "They know you're here, ma'am. Question now is how many they bring and when they come." The old man unloaded his supplies with practiced efficiency, talking as he worked. "We string bells on wire, circle the whole cabin, 30 yards out, waist high. Anyone crosses that line, we get 2 minutes warning. Not much, but enough." He showed Jim fishing line, nearly invisible, strong enough to hold against wind, but weak enough to break if someone stumbled through drunk or careless. Small bells, the kind used for Christmas decorations, stripped from Toby's own cabin. "We work fast. Get this done before noon." They worked in silence. 2 men moving through snow that came up to their thighs, stringing line from tree to fence post to tree again. Testing tension at each point. Annie helped carrying bells in a small bucket, counting them out loud to keep herself occupied. 43 bells total. Circling their small piece of safety, like a prayer made physical. Inside, Kate prepared for what was coming. She sorted medical supplies with the cold efficiency of someone who'd treated battlefield wounds, boiled bandages, sharpened the one surgical knife she'd managed to carry through her escape, filled every container with water. If they tried to burn them out, water would be the difference between survival and death by smoke. By noon, the perimeter was set. Toby tested it personally, walking through at various points. Each time the bells sang their warning. Clear. Impossible to miss. 2 minutes, Toby confirmed. Maybe less if they're running, but enough to get Annie hidden and guns positioned. He taught them the drill. At the sound of bells, Annie goes to the root cellar immediately. No questions, no delays. Kate takes the west window with the spare rifle. Jim covers the front door. Toby takes the east window, watching the tree line that provided the best cover for approaching enemies. They practiced until Annie could make it to the cellar in 15 seconds flat, until Kate could load and aim in under 10, until every person knew their role without thinking. "Good," Toby said finally. "Now we wait." Waiting, Jim discovered, was harder than fighting. Fighting gave you something to do, something to focus on beyond fear. Waiting left too much room for imagination, for counting all the ways this could go wrong, for measuring your ammunition against infinite scenarios and finding it wanting every time. That afternoon, Hank Cooper arrived. 60-year-old rancher from 5 miles north. Rode up to the cabin with his hands clearly visible and empty. The bells announced him. Everyone moved to positions automatically. Then Jim recognized him through the window and lowered his rifle. "Easy, friend," Hank called. "Just checking on neighbors." But his eyes were sharp, taking in the defensive preparations. The bells, the ammunition stacked by windows, the woman half hidden behind Jim, dark-haired and scared. Over coffee, Hank proved he knew more than he should. "Garrett brothers," he said without preamble. "They came to my ranch yesterday morning, asking about a dark-haired nurse, said she stole from them." Kate's hand shook on her cup. Jim moved closer to her. Unconscious protection. "I told them I hadn't seen anyone," Hank said. He looked at Kate directly, which was true at the time, but I'm guessing not true anymore. "You going to turn her in?" Jim's voice was flat, dangerous. "Turn her into killers." Hank laughed, but without humor. "Son, I got 2 daughters, both grown now. One's a nurse in Cheyenne. If she was running from murderers, I'd hope someone would hide her. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. So no, I'm not turning her in. I'm offering help. What kind of help? Toby asked. The kind with guns. I got 2 sons, Nathaniel and Samuel. Both fought in the Indian campaigns, both good shots. We can be here in 20 minutes if you signal. Why? Jim asked. Why risk your family? Hank's face hardened. Because I've seen what those Garrett boys do. 4 years ago, they killed a homesteader south of Fort Laramie, shot him and his wife, burned their cabin, left their children orphaned. He looked at Annie. Any man who'd hunt a woman ain't a man. He's a wolf in human skin, and wolves get put down. Toby nodded slow approval. How many Garretts we talking about? 5 that I saw. Mal's the leader. Scar from temple to jaw, dead eyes. Cyrus is second. Younger, meaner. 3 others brothers or hired guns, hard to tell. 5 against 2, Jim calculated. 5 against 5 if my boys come, Hank corrected. Maybe better odds than you think. They planned into the evening. Fields of fire. Ammunition distribution. Communication signals using Annie's whistle. 1 blast meant enemy spotted. 2 meant hold position. 3 meant retreat to cellar. 4 meant all clear. Annie practiced until she could do it in her sleep. The responsibility seemed to age her. 8 years old and learning how to be a soldier because the world left children no choice. After Hank left, promising to return at first light with his sons, the cabin felt smaller, more fragile, like the walls that had seemed solid now revealed themselves as just wood and hope against men who dealt in bullets and fire. That night, Annie asked the question they'd all been thinking. Papa, what if the bad men win? Jim knelt to her level. They won't. But what if they do? He looked at Kate, at Toby, at the small space they'd turned into a fortress. Then we'll know we fought for what's right. Sometimes that's all men can do. Annie climbed into his lap. I'm scared, Papa. Me too, darling. Really. Really. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing what needs doing anyway. After Annie fell asleep, the adults sat by the dying fire. Toby whittled a piece of pine into something that might become a bird. Kate mended a shirt with hands that trembled slightly. Jim cleaned his rifle for the 3rd time that day, obsessive and necessary. Tell me about the doctor, Jim said quietly. The one they killed. Kate's hands stilled on the fabric. Dr. Amos Thornton. He found me after my parents drowned. I was 16, half dead from exposure and grief. He took me in, not as a servant, as family. Her voice went thick. He trained me, taught me medicine, reading everything I know. For 13 years he was my father. And you watched him die. I watched him murdered, shot down like an animal because he wouldn't give criminals what they wanted. She looked up, eyes bright with unshed tears. I hid in the wagon like a coward while the only family I had bled out on a way station floor. You survived, Toby said. That's not cowardice. That's smart. It feels like cowardice. Feeling don't make it true. Jim set down his rifle, moved to sit beside her. Their shoulders touched. Small contact that felt enormous in its significance. You're here now, he said, and you're going to testify. You're going to make sure those men hang. That's not cowardice. That's justice. If I survive long enough to testify. You will. We'll make sure of it. Kate turned to look at him. Really look. Searching his face for something she couldn't name. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. Jim was quiet for a long moment. Outside, wolves howled. Inside, the fire crackled its slow death. Because you make Annie laugh, he said finally. Because this cabin's been a tomb for 3 years, and you made it feel like a home again. Because maybe some things are worth fighting for, even if you barely know them. He met her eyes. Because I'm tired of surviving. I want to live. And somehow you reminded me there's a difference. The kiss happened without planning. One moment they were looking at each other. The next Kate's hand was on his cheek, and Jim was leaning forward, and their lips met with a desperate gentleness that spoke of two people who'd forgotten what it felt like to want something beyond the next sunrise. They broke apart breathing hard. Toby had conveniently disappeared to check the perimeter, giving them privacy, understanding what they were only beginning to admit. "I shouldn't want this," Jim whispered. "But you do." "But I do." They held each other as the fire died to embers. Outside, the temperature dropped toward 30 below. Inside, two broken people found warmth in each other's arms and tried not to think about how many hours might be left before violence shattered this fragile piece of peace they'd built. Morning came too soon and too bright. December 28th, the day everything changed. Hank arrived at dawn with his sons. Nathaniel, 27, serious and solid. Samuel, 24, who talked too much but moved like a soldier. Both carrying rifles, both understanding exactly what they'd signed up for. "Ma'am," Nathaniel said, simply nodding to Kate. "Heard you need an army." "More like a militia," Samuel added, grinning despite the situation. "But we're cheaper." They positioned themselves efficiently, military training showing through civilian clothes. Samuel took the east tree line, hiding 30 yards out with a rifle and 200 rounds. An invisible sniper. Nathaniel took the north window, Hank the west, Toby the east inside. Jim held the front door. Kate and Annie went to the root cellar, the safest position, the medical station, the last refuge if everything went wrong. And then they waited. Hours crawled. 9 o'clock, 10, 11. Nothing, just wind and snow and the weight of anticipation. At noon, Samuel whistled once. Enemy spotted. Everyone froze. Annie clutched Kate's hand in the darkness of the cellar. Above them, men moved to windows. Safeties clicked off. Breathing slowed. "Where?" Jim called, voice barely carrying. Samuel whistled twice, then once. "Southwest, single rider." Through the window, Jim saw him. Lone horseman on the southern ridge, half a mile out. Not hiding, deliberately visible. Sitting there for 10 minutes watching them, letting them know he knew. Then he rode away. Slow, unhurried. Message delivered. "Psychological warfare," Toby said. "Making us scared, making us make mistakes." "When will they come?" Hank asked. "Tonight. Maybe tomorrow, dawn. But soon. They're done scouting." The day stretched into evening. They ate in shifts, never less than 3 guns on watch. Annie tried to lighten the mood by showing Samuel her wooden horse, explaining with intense seriousness that her papa had made it, and he was very talented, and maybe he should quit ranching and make toys instead. Samuel, chastened by 8-year-old wisdom, agreed solemnly that yes, her papa was very talented indeed. At 3 in the afternoon, Nathaniel called out, "Movement tree line north." Everyone took positions fast practiced. Annie to cellar without being told. Kate right behind her. Toby had his spyglass up. Lost it. Maybe nothing. Maybe deer. 10 minutes later, a deer did emerge. Everyone exhaled. False alarm. But the tension didn't break. It built. Every shadow became an enemy. Every sound, a threat. The waiting was breaking them down exactly as intended. At 6 o'clock, as twilight turned snow blue, the rider returned. Same position. Same deliberate visibility. But this time, he raised his hand, pointed directly at the cabin, drew his finger across his throat. Universal sign. You're dead. Then he rode away. "That's it," Jim said. "Tonight. They come tonight." They ate dinner cold. No fire to silhouette them against windows. Venison jerky and hard bread and fear that sat in their stomachs like stones. Toby pulled Jim aside, spoke quiet enough that the others couldn't hear. "I want you to know something, son." The old man's voice was serious, heavy with things unsaid. "I'm 68 years old, had a good life, long life, seen things most men never see, done things I'm proud of, and things I regret. Toby, don't. Let me finish. Toby gripped his shoulder. You got decades ahead. Annie needs you. That woman in there, she needs you too. Even if she don't know it yet. So if it comes down to it, if someone's got to make a stand to buy time, it's going to be me. Absolutely not. That's not your choice, boy. I'm telling you how it is. Toby smiled, sad and certain. Everything I taught you, you already knew. You just needed permission to trust yourself. Now I'm giving you permission to let me do this. He pressed something into Jim's hand. A pocket watch. Gold heavy, worn from decades of use. This was my father's. His father's before that. Now it's yours. When Annie gets married, you give it to her husband. Tell him old Toby said to protect her or answer to me in the afterlife. Jim's eyes burned. I can't lose you too. You're not losing me. I'm giving you time. There's a difference. They stood in the darkness. Teacher and student. Father and son in everything but blood. Then Toby moved away back to his window, ready to do what he'd always done. Stand between danger and the people he loved. At 8 o'clock the bells rang. Not one bell, multiple. From 3 sides simultaneously. Northeast, west, and south. North left open deliberately. A trap. Positions? Toby's voice cut through rising panic. Now. Annie ran for the cellar. Kate right behind her, grabbing the rifle as she went. No hesitation. Training taking over. Jim at front door. Toby at east window. Hank at west. Nathaniel at north. Samuel outside in the trees, invisible and deadly. 5 men inside the cabin and perimeter. 5 men approaching from outside. Even odds. Terrible odds. A voice called from the darkness. Strong. Confident. Used to being obeyed. James Holloway. We know you're in there. Jim didn't answer. Silence was often the best response. We don't want trouble with you, friend. Just send out the woman. Nobody else gets hurt. Still silence. Come on now. She's a thief and a liar. We're just taking her back to face justice. The word justice from a murderer's mouth. Almost funny if it wasn't so deadly. You got a little girl in there. Think about her. You really want her to see her daddy die over some stranger. In the cellar, Annie heard every word. Kate held her close hand over her mouth to muffle the child's frightened breathing. Finally, Jim spoke. Opened the window just slightly, voice carrying clear in the cold night air. Justice. You murdered a federal doctor. This woman's a witness. She's under my protection. Pause. Then laughter from outside. Cold, humorless. Your funeral, friend. The voice belonged to Mal Garrett. Jim knew it now. Recognized the flat affect of a man who killed without conscience. Open fire. Windows shattered inward, glass exploding in deadly sprays. Everyone dropped. Bullets punched through walls, through furniture, through the life they'd built. Return fire erupted, rifles blazing from every window. The cabin filled with smoke and noise and the copper smell of gunpowder. Nathaniel fired twice. Hit one northern approach. Hank's rifle cracked. Missed. Corrected. Second shot down. From the trees, Samuel's rifle spoke with cold precision. Once. Twice. Garrett's shoulder. He's pulling back. But the return fire was withering. 5 guns outside, pouring lead into the cabin. Bullets splintering wood, etching lines of death through walls. Too close. Too many. They're going for the barn, Toby shouted. Trying to torch it. Jim saw movement. Dark figure with something burning moving toward the barn where their winter hay was stored. If it burned, livestock would starve. If it burned close enough, the cabin would catch. Annie's whistle blew, 3 sharp blasts from the cellar. Jim spun, back window. Another figure approaching. Annie had seen from the small cellar window, warning them, brave girl. He fired blind through the wall. Heard a scream. The figure dropped. Good girl, Toby called down. Good brave girl. But the barn threat remained. The figure was closer now, 10 yards, 8. About to throw his torch. Samuel's rifle cracked from the darkness. Once. The figure stumbled. Torch fell into snow, hissing out. The figure kept running. Samuel fired again. This time the figure dropped and didn't rise. "Barn's clear," Samuel called. But they were burning through ammunition faster than planned. Jim counted his shots. 20 rounds gone already, 20 left. Not enough. Not nearly enough. An hour of firefight. Both sides entrenched. Both sides bleeding. One Garrett brother down, wounded but alive. Another dead near the barn. Samuel had been hit, grazed across the shoulder, but still fighting. Toby took a bullet through his side. Jim's blood went cold. "I'm fine," the old man shouted, pressing cloth against the wound. "Keep shooting." But he wasn't fine. Jim could see it. The way Toby's hands shook. The blood spreading across his shirt. Too much blood. Kate wanted to come up to help, but Jim shouted her down. "Stay with Annie, that's an order." In the cellar, Kate held the child and listened to the battle above. Every shot was a prayer. Every silence was terror, waiting to hear whose voice would call next, or whose voice would never call again. At 10 o'clock, the shooting stopped. Eerie silence. Worse than gunfire. At least gunfire told you where enemies were. "Anyone hit bad?" Hank called. "Samuel," Nathaniel's voice worried about his brother. "Flesh wound," Samuel called from the darkness. "I'm good. Toby." Jim couldn't see him in the smoke. Still breathing. But his voice was weak, thready. Not good. Outside, Mal Garrett's voice again. "You can't last forever. We got all night. All winter. You got enough food. Enough ammunition." He was right. They were trapped. Ammunition running low. One man wounded badly. Trapped like animals in a cage waiting for the hunter to reload. "What do we do?" Hank asked. Toby pulled himself upright, blood staining his shirt black in the lamplight. "I know what I do. Toby. No, it's time, son." The old man checked his rifle. "I'm bleeding out anyway. Hour, maybe 2, but I can still shoot, still run, still buy you time. I won't let you. You don't have a choice." Toby gripped Jim's arm hard. Final. "They're focused on this cabin. I draw them north, give you a chance to thin them out. Maybe even run for it if it comes to that." "Toby, please. Listen to me." The old man's eyes were fierce, alive with purpose despite the blood soaking through his clothes. "I told you this morning. Everything I taught you, you already knew. You're a good man, James Holloway. Better son than my blood ever gave me. Now you listen." He pulled Jim close. "You marry that woman. Give Annie brothers and sisters. Fill this cabin with life. That's your job. Living. Really living. Not just surviving. I need you. No, you don't. Haven't for years. But I needed you. Needed to feel useful. Needed to matter." Toby smiled through pain. "So let me matter one last time." Before Jim could stop him, Toby moved. Kicked open the front door and charged into the darkness, rifle blazing, shouting at the top of his lungs. "Come on, you cowards! One old man against all of you!" He ran north, firing as he went, drawing fire like lightning to a rod. Garrett's men couldn't resist the target. They converged on him, forgetting the cabin, focusing on the lone attacker who dared to face them. "Cover him!" Jim shouted, already firing. Nathaniel and Hank joining, pouring suppressing fire into the darkness. Samuel from his position doing the same. But there were too many. Too many guns. Toby made it 30 yards. Impossibly far for a 68-year-old man bleeding from a gut wound. 30 yards through snow while bullets kicked up white around him. 30 yards of pure courage. Then he went down. No! Jim was moving before thought. Out the door, into the kill zone, running toward where Toby had fallen. Bullets everywhere. Hank and Nathaniel providing covering fire. Samuel's rifle working overtime. Jim reached Toby, grabbed him, started dragging him back, Leave me, Toby gasped. Get back inside. Not a chance. They made it 10 yards, 20, Toby's blood painting a trail in the snow, 25 yards, almost there. Then Toby's hand gripped Jim's arm. Enough, stop. We're almost. Stop. Toby's voice carried absolute command. Look at me, son. Jim looked, saw what he'd been denying, the gut wound, the massive blood loss, the gray pallor of a man with minutes left, not hours. Get inside, Toby whispered. Let me die doing something that matters. You matter. You've always mattered. Then honor me. Let me go. Around them bullets still flew. But for this moment in this small space, there was just an old man and the son he'd chosen. Everything else faded. Thank you, Jim said, for everything. Toby smiled. Tell her Grandpa Toby said to be brave. Tell her courage isn't fearless. It's fear walking forward anyway. I will. And that woman. Marry her. Don't wait. Life's too short for waiting. I promise. Good boy. Good man. Toby's hand loosened. Now go, before they find their courage and rush you. Jim ran back to the cabin, bullets chasing him but missing. Luck or providence or Toby's final gift. He made it through the door. Nathaniel slammed it behind him. From the darkness, they heard Toby's voice one last time, shouting at his attackers. That all you got? 68 years old, and still tougher than you cowards. Then rifle fire. A scream. Silence. Colonel Tobias McCrae. 68 years old. Former cavalry officer. Frontier survivor teacher. Friend. Father. In all the ways that mattered, died in the snow, buying time for a family that wasn't his blood, but was his heart. In the cellar, Annie heard her father's anguished cry, and knew. Knew before anyone told her. Knew the way children know when the world shifts, and someone they love is gone forever. She started crying. Kate held her also crying for a man she'd barely known, but who'd stood between her and death without hesitation. Upstairs, Jim sat with his back against the wall. Toby's blood on his hands. Toby's pocket watch heavy in his pocket. The battle continued outside, but he barely heard it. All he heard was an old man's final words. Live. Really, live. Toby had died buying them time. The question was whether Jim would be brave enough to use it. Dawn broke cold and merciless on December 29th. The gunfire had stopped 3 hours ago, replaced by a silence more terrible than any battle. Jim stood at the window, watching gray light creep across snow stained with blood. Toby's body lay where he'd fallen 30 yards out, already dusted with fresh powder. They couldn't retrieve him. Not yet. Not with Garrett's men still out there waiting. Inside the cabin, exhaustion hung thick as the gun smoke. Hank sat slumped against the west wall, reloading by muscle memory alone. Nathaniel nursed a grazed shoulder that Kate had bandaged in the brief lull. Samuel had come in from the trees at 4 a.m, half frozen, but alive, reporting 2 Garretts dead and 3 retreated to regroup. They'll come again, Jim said. His voice was empty, hollowed out. They got to. Can't let a witness live. Annie hadn't spoken since Toby died. She sat in the corner, clutching the whistle he'd given her, staring at nothing with eyes that had seen too much for 8 years. Kate stayed close, one hand on the child's shoulder, the other resting on the rifle she'd learned to use in one terrible night. Jim counted ammunition. 18 rounds for the Winchester, maybe a dozen for the Colt. Hank had 20. Nathaniel 15. Samuel had burned through most of his 200 rounds holding the tree line. They had enough for one more fight. Maybe. If they were lucky and precise, and if God hadn't turned his face away from this blood-soaked piece of Wyoming territory. We can't hold another siege, Hank said, voice hoarse from shouting orders in the dark. Not with what we got left. Then we don't wait for them to come to us. Jim's voice was flat. empty of everything except the cold calculation of a man who'd lost too much and refused to lose more. "We take the fight to them." Everyone looked at him like he'd gone mad. "That's suicide," Nathaniel said. "Staying here is suicide. Slower, but just as certain." Jim moved to the table where Toby had sketched maps the day before. The old man's blood was still on the corner of the paper. "They're camped somewhere close, probably Thornton's station 10 miles southeast. Same place where they killed Dr. Thornton." "You can't know that," Samuel said, "but it makes sense. Shelter water off the main road enough that army patrols won't stumble on them." Jim traced the route. 2 hours ride, maybe 3 in the snow. "You're talking about hunting them," Hank said. He understood now, saw the cold purpose in Jim's eyes. "Turning the tables. Toby died buying us time. I won't waste it cowering in this cabin waiting to die." Kate stood. "Then I'm coming with you." "No. I'm the witness. This is my fight more than anyone's." "Which is exactly why you stay." Jim's voice was iron. "Annie needs you, and if this goes wrong, someone has to get her to safety, to the army, to testify about everything." Their eyes met across the smoky cabin. Something passed between them that had nothing to do with words. Promise, fear, the acknowledgement that this might be goodbye. "Come back," Kate said. "I'll try." "Not good enough. Promise me." Jim looked at Annie, at the child who'd already lost her mother and baby brother, who'd just lost the grandfather figure she'd barely known, who couldn't survive losing him too. "I promise." He turned to Hank. "Can your boys hold the cabin?" "We can," Nathaniel said. "Long enough to get the women away if it comes to that." "Then Hank and I go hunting. Rest of you ford up here. Anyone approaches who isn't us, you shoot first." Jim knelt before Annie. She looked at him with those ancient eyes, and he saw she already understood what he was going to do. Children who grew up on the frontier learned early that sometimes men rode out and didn't come back. "I'll return," he said. "I promise." "You promised Mama you'd live." Her voice was small, broken. "Don't break promises, Papa." "I won't." He pulled her close, breathed in the scent of her hair. Innocent soap and wood smoke and childhood that was ending too fast. "You're the bravest girl in Wyoming. Colonel Toby said so. You remember that while I'm gone." He handed her the pocket watch. "Keep this safe. It was Grandpa Toby's. His father's before that. Now it's ours. You hold on to it till I get back." Annie clutched it like a lifeline. Jim stood, moved to Kate. They had no privacy, no moment alone, just the entire cabin watching as he pulled her close and kissed her deep, desperate, the kiss of a man who might be riding to his death. "When I come back," he whispered against her lips, "we talk about everything. About staying. About becoming a real family." "When you come back," Kate agreed, because if was a word neither could afford. Jim and Hank armed themselves efficiently. Extra ammunition divided between them. Knives. Jim took his best rifle, the Winchester that had belonged to his father. Hank carried a Sharps that could drop a buffalo at 300 yards. They rode out at 7. 2 men against 3 killers tracking back along the path the Garretts had taken when they retreated, following blood in the snow, following hate toward its source. The land stretched white and empty around them, beautiful and deadly. Wyoming in winter didn't forgive mistakes or weakness. Neither did Jim Holloway. He'd spent 3 years being weak, being broken, letting grief define him. Toby had died to give him a chance at something better, at life instead of mere survival. He wouldn't fail the old man now. They tracked in silence, both men conserving energy and heat. The Garrett trail was easy to follow. 3 horses, 1 rider wounded and bleeding steadily, heading southeast, exactly as Jim had predicted, toward Thornton's station. "What's the plan?" Hank asked after an hour of riding. "Kill them." "I meant tactically." "I meant literally." Jim's voice was cold. precise. They murdered Dr. Thornton. They murdered Toby. They're planning to murder Kate and probably Annie and everyone who helped them. So we kill them first. Simple. Your wife raised you to be a good man. She did. But good men don't survive by being gentle. Not out here. They reached the way station at 10. Single-structure barn attached built to house travelers passing through between Fort Laramie and Cheyenne. Smoke rose from the chimney. 3 horses in the corral confirming Jim's guess. They circled wide, approaching from the north where trees provided cover. From 50 yards out, they could see through the grimy window into the main room. 3 men around a table. Garrett's scar visible even at this distance. Nathan, the youngest, maybe 19, and Jacob, middle brother, with his arm in a sling from Samuel's bullet. "No 4th man," Hank whispered. "Where's the lookout? Behind us or dead? Either way, we move fast." But before they could advance, a voice spoke from behind them. "Drop the rifles! Slow!" They'd been outplayed. The lookout hadn't been ahead. He'd been tracking their back trail, waiting for them to focus on the station and forget the basics. Never assume. Never stop checking your 6. Mistakes that got men killed. Jim and Hank lowered their rifles. "Turn around. Hands where I see them." They turned. The man was young, maybe 22, scared but holding his pistol steady enough. Hired gun, not a brother. Probably doing this for money instead of blood loyalty. "They paying you enough to die for this?" Jim asked. $50, more than I make in 6 months ranching. That worth getting hanged because that's where this ends. Federal murder. Killing a government doctor. They'll hang everyone involved. Doubt flickered across the young man's face. "You're lying. Army's already hunting them. Posted notices in every town. Your name too, probably soon as they figure out who you are." "I didn't kill anybody, just stood watch." "Judge won't care. You ride with killers, you hang with killers." The gun wavered. "What do you want?" "Walk away right now. Take your horse and ride. Don't look back. We never saw you. You never saw us." "They'll kill me if they find out." "We'll kill you if you don't leave. Choose." The young man looked at the station, at Jim, at his future measured in seconds. Then he made the only smart choice he'd probably ever make. Lowered his gun, backed toward the barn, found his horse, and rode north fast without looking back. "Think he'll warn them?" Hank asked. "Don't care. Down to 3 against 2 now. Better odds." They repositioned, took up spots on opposite sides of the way station. Jim at the front door, Hank at the back, classic pincer, no way out except through bullets. Jim didn't knock, just kicked in the door. Rifle up and ready. 3 men froze, hands moving toward guns but not fast enough, not against a man who'd already accepted he might die and decided to take them with him. "Don't." Jim's voice was death incarnate. "Hank's got the back door. You're surrounded." Garrett recovered first, smile spreading slow and mean across his scarred face. "Didn't expect to see you here, Holloway." "I'm full of surprises." "Where's your old friend, the one who charged us?" Jim's finger tightened on the trigger. "Dead. Because of you. Died a fool's death. Should have stayed inside where it was safe." Wrong thing to say. Exactly the wrong thing. Jim's remaining restraint shattered like winter ice. "He died a hero. More than you'll ever be. Look." Mal tried a different approach. Reasonable. Almost friendly. "We can make a deal here. Woman's not worth all this blood." "She's not just a woman. She's family." "You barely know her." "I know enough." "What are they paying you?" Mal leaned back, calculating, reading Jim wrong, thinking this was about money instead of honor. "We'll double it, triple it, just walk away." "Not about money." "Everything's about money, friend." "What about family honor, justice for men you murdered?" Mal's face hardened. The negotiation was over. That lying bitch can't testify if she's dead. The word about Kate, the woman who'd brought light back into his cabin, who made Annie laugh, who kissed him like he mattered. The casual cruelty of it broke something in Jim. "She's alive. You're not. That's all that matters now." Mal went for his gun. Fast. Practiced. The kind of speed that came from killing often and well. But Jim was faster. Driven by grief and rage and the promise he'd made to Toby. To live. To protect. To be worthy of the sacrifice. He fired. The bullet caught Mal in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. Jacob went for the rifle, leaning against the wall. Hank shot through the back window, shattering glass, and Jacob's chest in one explosive moment. Nathan, the youngest, dove for cover behind the overturned table. The room filled with gun smoke and screaming, and the chaos of violence compressed into seconds that felt like hours. Jim and Mal grappled, both wounded, both desperate. The rifle fell away. They fought with hands and knives and hatred. Mal was younger, stronger, used to bar fights and dirty fighting. But Jim had rage, had purpose, had the memory of Toby's last words driving him forward. He smashed Mal's face with his fist. Once, twice, 3 times, until the man's nose broke and blood sprayed hot across Jim's knuckles. Mal stumbled back, reaching for a knife at his belt. Jim shot him. Point blank. Center mass. No hesitation. Mal Garrett fell. The man who'd murdered Dr. Thornton, who'd ordered Toby's death, who'd tried to burn innocent women and children for the crime of showing mercy. He died on a dirty way station floor, bleeding out fast while staring at the ceiling and maybe finally understanding that evil always finds its reckoning. Hank had Jacob covered, but the middle brother was already dead. Lung shot. Gone before he hit the ground. That left Nathan, the youngest, barely more than a boy, hands raised, crying, surrendering. "Don't shoot. Please, I didn't want this. My brothers made me. I didn't want to hurt anybody." Hank raised his rifle. "Finish him." Jim stood over Nathan, gun aimed at the boy's head. One pull of the trigger, and this would be over. Justice served, revenge complete. Toby's death answered with blood. His finger rested on the trigger, pressure building. One more pound of force and a life ended. Easy, deserved, right. But Toby's voice echoed in his head. Being a good man means doing right even when it's hard. Jim lowered the gun. "No." "He'll hang anyway," Hank said. "Why not finish it? Because that's what they do. We're better." Jim grabbed Nathan by his collar, hauled him up. "You're going to testify against everyone involved. Names, faces, buyers for the morphine, accomplices, everything. Understand?" "Yes, sir." Nathan was sobbing now. "Yes, sir. Anything. Please don't kill me." "I won't. But if you lie, if you run, if you do anything except help hang every person involved in murdering Dr. Thornton, I'll find you. And mercy won't save you twice. Clear?" "Clear. Yes, sir. I'll tell everything, I swear." They tied him up. Used the station's rope normally for securing horses, now for securing a killer too cowardly to die with his brothers. Jacob bled out while they worked last gasping breath rattling around the tiny room. 2 Garretts dead, 1 captured, the rest scattered or dead from the cabin siege. It was over. As they stepped outside, cavalry appeared on the horizon. 30 soldiers led by Captain Marcus Hayes, too late for the battle, but perfect timing for the aftermath. They'd been 1 day out when the siege started, pushed their horses hard when they heard gunfire carrying across the frozen landscape. Captain Hayes took in the scene with a soldier's eye. 2 civilians, 2 dead bodies inside, 1 prisoner. Blood in the snow leading to a 3rd dead man. "What happened here?" Jim told him. "All of it. The attack on the medical wagon, Kate's escape, the siege, Toby's death, the final confrontation." Hayes listened without interrupting, making notes, asking clarifying questions. "You should have waited for us," Hayes said finally. "They were planning to burn my family alive. I didn't have time to wait." Hayes looked at the bodies, at Nathan, weeping against a post, at Hank and Jim, both wounded, both exhausted, both alive. "I should arrest you for vigilante justice." "Then do it." Hayes was quiet for a long moment, then extended his hand. But I won't. These men were wanted for federal murder. You acted in defense of a witness and your family. Far as I'm concerned, this was legal." They shook, soldier to civilian, both understanding that sometimes law and justice weren't the same thing, and sometimes you had to choose. "We'll escort you home," Hayes said. "Make sure no surprises are waiting." The ride back took 4 hours, Army moving slow to protect civilian scouts ranging ahead checking for ambush. They found none. The Garrett gang was broken, dead or captured or scattered to wind. As they crested the final hill, Jim saw his cabin. Still standing. Still smoking from the chimney. Still home. Annie saw them first, screamed with joy that carried across the snow. "Papa!" She ran out without coat or shoes, heedless of cold, heedless of everything except her father coming home alive. Jim dismounted fast, caught her as she crashed into him, spinning her around while she sobbed and laughed and held him tight enough to hurt. "I knew you'd come back. I knew it." Kate stood on the porch face, streaked with tears. Legs unsteady, relief so powerful it looked like pain. Jim walked to her, Annie still in his arms, and pulled them both close. "It's over," he said. "We're safe. All of us." They stood there while the army secured the perimeter, while Hank's sons emerged from the cabin, looking exhausted but triumphant, while Captain Hayes ordered his men to retrieve Toby's body with honor and dignity. Safe. Finally. After 4 days that felt like 4 years. That night they buried Colonel Tobias McCrae on the hill overlooking Jim's land, the highest point where he could watch over them forever. Simple ceremony attended by everyone who'd known him. Soldiers stood at attention. Civilians bowed heads. Annie placed wildflowers on the grave, dried ones saved from summer because winter had none to give. Jim spoke words coming rough and broken, but necessary. "Toby was the best man I knew. Taught me everything that matters. Not just survival, but honor, courage, love. He showed me that family isn't blood, it's choice. We choose who to stand beside, who to fight for, who to die for." His voice cracked. "Toby chose us, over and over, even unto death. He saved my life more times than I can count, not just with his guns, with his wisdom." He looked at Annie. "He taught this brave girl that courage isn't fearless. It's fear walking forward anyway." Looked at Kate. "He taught me that second chances are real, if you're brave enough to take them." To the gravestone. "Toby, I promise you this. I'll live, really live, not just survive. I'll teach Annie everything you taught me, and when she has children, I'll teach them too. Your wisdom won't die with you. That's your legacy. That's your immortality." Hank spoke next. 20 years of friendship compressed into 3 minutes of halting memories. Toby arriving in Wyoming in 1845 at 18 years old. Toby surviving Indians and outlaws and winters that killed stronger men. Toby choosing to stand with those who needed standing with every single time. "That's the measure of a man," Hank concluded. "Not what he takes, but what he gives. Toby gave everything. The world's poorer for losing him. But we're richer for having known him." Annie placed the whistle on the grave. "So you can call for help if you need it, Grandpa Toby." Hearts broke at the gesture, but also mended, because that was exactly what Toby would have wanted. Remembered with love instead of grief. Honored with life instead of tears. Captain Hayes handled the official business with efficiency born of long military service. Took statements from everyone. Kate's testimony secured Nathan Garrett's full cooperation. The boy confessed to everything. Named accomplices. Identified buyers for the stolen morphine. His testimony would hang a dozen men before this was done. "Justice will be served," Hayes assured Kate. "Dr. Thornton's murder will be avenged." "It doesn't bring him back." "No, ma'am, but it means his death wasn't meaningless. Other doctors, other innocents are safer. That's worth something." Hayes turned to Jim. "The government appreciates what you did. harboring a witness at great personal cost. We'd like to compensate you. I don't want money. Not money. Land. Hayes pulled out papers. Your homestead. You've been here 7 years. 7 years this spring. Requirement is 5 years plus 10 acres cultivated. You've exceeded both. I'm authorized to grant immediate patent. The land is yours, free and clear. Jim stared. You can do that. I can and I am. Consider it done. 160 acres of Wyoming territory. His, permanently. The dream that brought him and Abigail west. The future they'd planned and she'd never lived to see. Now real, now certain. There's another matter, Hayes continued. He looked at Kate. Miss Brennan, you're a skilled nurse. Territory needs nurses. There's a position in Cheyenne if you want it. Kate glanced at Jim. Neither spoke, but volumes passed between them. Or, Hayes added with the barest hint of a smile, if you were married to a homesteader, you could practice here, serve the local community, be close to meaningful family. He left them to consider that. Jim found Kate an hour later standing at Toby's grave, looking out over the land that stretched forever under stars that burned cold and bright. I know I said we'd wait, Jim began. Till this was over. Till we were sure. He knelt in the snow, right there, on the hill where they'd buried a hero. But I am sure. I've never been more sure of anything. Kate Brennan, will you marry me? Will you be my wife? Annie's mother? My partner in all things? Kate started laughing and crying simultaneously. You're proposing now, in the snow at a graveside. Toby's watching, wanted to make sure he saw it. Then yes. She pulled him up, kissed him hard. 1,000 times yes. Annie appeared from behind a tree, where she'd been definitely not eavesdropping. You said yes? I said yes. The child ran to them, crashed into both adults with enough force to nearly knock them over. We're really going to be a family. We really are, Jim and Kate said together. On the hill overlooking their land under stars and moonlight, and the quiet blessing of a dead man who'd wanted nothing more than for them to live, 3 people held each other and became what they'd needed all along. Family. Spring came late to Wyoming territory that year. March turned to April before the real thaw began. By then, Kate had seen 27 patients, delivered 1 baby, saved 3 lives from infection. The community knew her now, trusted her, called her their nurse with pride and possession. The wedding was planned for April 20th. Simple ceremony. Frontier style. No fancy dress or elaborate celebration. Just community gathering to witness 2 people promising forever. Mrs. Cooper sewed Kate's dress. Simple blue that matched her eyes. Other women brought food. Men repaired the barn damaged in the siege. Children ran wild in the warming weather. Wyoming at its finest. Hard people making soft moments because beauty was rare and therefore precious. Kate insisted on visiting Toby's grave the morning of the wedding. Needed his blessing, even though he couldn't give it. Needed to acknowledge that he'd made this possible. I wish you were here, she told the gravestone. Simple granite with simple words. Tobias McCrae, teacher, friend, hero. He is here, Jim said from behind her, just in a different way. They stood together watching the sunrise. Everything I have is because of him, Jim said. This land, this life, you. He'd say you earned it. Maybe, but I wish he could see it. Wind rustled through new grass just beginning to push through old snow. They both smiled. Yeah, Jim agreed. He sees it. The ceremony at 2 was perfect. Hank walked Kate down the improvised aisle. Annie scattered flower petals with intense concentration that made everyone smile. 60 people attended. Big crowd for a frontier wedding. Testament to how this community had embraced the nurse who'd nearly died on Christmas Eve. The preacher spoke traditional words made new by circumstance. James Holloway, do you take this woman? I do. With everything I am. Kate Brennan, do you take this man? I do. With everything I have. Annie presented the rings. Gold bands made from Toby's pocket watch chain melted down and reformed, carrying his legacy forward into new life. Jim slipped the ring on Kate's finger. With this ring, I promise you'll never be alone again. Kate returned the gesture. With this ring, I promise you'll never have to be strong alone. Annie interrupted before the pronouncement. Wait. Everyone stopped. Can I say something? The child asked. The preacher smiled. Of course. Annie looked at Kate. I promise to be a good daughter. At Jim. I promise to be brave like Grandpa Toby taught me. At both. And I promise to love you forever. Not a dry eye in attendance. By the power vested in me, the preacher concluded, and witnessed by this community and blessed by God above, I now pronounce you husband, wife, and family. They kissed while everyone cheered. Annie hugged both their legs. The community erupted in celebration, food and music and dancing. Life continuing despite death, joy built on foundations of grief, but no less real for it. Hank raised the first toast. To the Holloway family, long life, many children, warm winters. Samuel added his, to the bravest woman I've met and the craziest man, both proving that good people still exist. Kate surprised everyone by standing with her glass. To Colonel Toby McCrae, who isn't here but should be, who taught us that family is choice, who gave his life so we could have this day. Toby, wherever you are, thank you. Your legacy lives on. Everyone raised glasses to Toby. Jim and Kate snuck away after an hour walk to Toby's grave in the golden afternoon light, stood hand in hand, looking at the stone. Think he approves? Jim asked. I know he does. They stood in comfortable silence. Wind warm for the first time in months. Snow nearly gone. Land turning green. Wyoming showing its rare gentle face. Everything I have, Jim said quietly. I owe to people I've lost. Abigail gave me Annie. Toby gave me purpose. You gave me life again. We gave each other life, Kate corrected. That's how this works. They walked back to the celebration, to community, to beginning. Behind them, a gravestone stood watch over the land. A silent guardian, a permanent reminder that the best of us leave pieces behind. Not in stone or gold, but in changed hearts and saved lives and families built from strangers who chose each other. Below the hill, Annie played with other children, safe, happy, healing. She clutched Toby's whistle in one hand, Jim's promise in her heart. The world hadn't beaten her, hadn't made her bitter or afraid. She'd seen death and chosen life, seen grief and chosen joy. That was the real inheritance. Not land or money, but the knowledge that courage could be learned, that family could be built, that the worst nights eventually gave way to dawn. And sometimes, just sometimes, the blizzard that tried to kill you delivered exactly what you needed to survive. 5 years later, April 1881, the Holloway homestead thrived. 40 acres under cultivation now. New barn standing twice the size of the old one. Medical clinic in its own building where Kate saw patients 4 days each week. The cabin expanded with 2 added rooms to hold a family that kept growing. Annie was 13 now, teaching her younger siblings with the patience of someone who'd learned early that knowledge was currency, more valuable than gold. Thomas and Abigail, 4-year-old twins, named for the ones who'd saved their family, followed her everywhere with complete devotion. Little Tobias toddled at 2 years old, with his mother's determination and his father's stubborn jaw. Kate was pregnant again. Baby number 4 coming by summer. Jim had stopped apologizing for the large family. Started seeing it as Toby would have, as abundance as life winning over death, as the best possible revenge against men who'd tried to end them. This morning, Annie taught the twins to split kindling in the yard. Swing down, not across, she instructed. That's what Grandpa Toby taught Papa, and Papa taught me. Now I teach you." Thomas struggled with the technique. "Why? Because skills keep families alive. Because knowledge is inheritance. Because someday you'll teach your children and Grandpa Toby's wisdom will live forever." Abigail looked at her twin. "We never met Grandpa Toby." "No, but I did. And I'll tell you everything about him." Inside, Jim reviewed the ledger with satisfaction. 400 bushels of wheat last year, $200 profit from crops, 50 monthly from Kate's clinic. Add in vegetables, eggs, occasional beef sales. They cleared over $1,000 annually. Not rich by city standards, wealthy beyond measure by frontier ones. "Papa." Annie appeared in the doorway. "Tell us the story." "Which story?" "The blizzard. How Mama Kate came." Thomas and Abigail crowded in. "Yes, tell us." Little Tobias toddled over, not understanding, but wanting to be included. Jim lifted him into his lap. Kate joined from the clinic, wiping her hands clean, settling beside him. The whole family gathered for a story they'd heard 100 times, but never tired of. The wind carried no mercy on Christmas Eve 1876. Jim began using the same words every time because ritual mattered. Because some stories deserved to be told exactly right. But it carried something else. Something we didn't know we needed. It carried hope. It carried family. It carried your mother. The children listened rapt while he told of finding Kate in the snow of Toby, arriving with wisdom and ammunition of the Garrett brothers, and the siege of an old man's final sacrifice of courage found in the darkest moments of love built on foundations of grief. When he finished, Thomas asked, "Was Grandpa Toby the bravest man ever?" "The bravest I ever knew." "Braver than you, Papa." Jim smiled. "Much braver. He taught me everything I know about courage." Abigail piped up. "Tell about the watch." Jim pulled it from his pocket. Toby's watch carried every day for 5 years, polished smooth by constant handling, a physical reminder of debts that could never be repaid except by living well. This was Grandpa Toby's, his father's before him, his grandfather's before that. He opened it. Inside he'd engraved names: Abigail Holloway, Thomas Holloway, Tobias McCrae, Amos Thornton, everyone who'd died to make this moment possible. "When Annie gets married," Jim told the twins, "I'll give this to her husband. Tell him what I'm telling you now. Protect her or answer to all these people in the afterlife. Tell him family isn't blood. It's choice. It's standing with people when wolves are at the door." Annie blushed, but listened carefully. 13 years old, and already understanding, she carried weight legacy responsibility to honor those who'd saved her. That evening, the whole family walked to Toby's grave. They did this every Sunday without fail, kept the flowers fresh, kept the grass neat, kept the memory alive. The gravestone had weathered 5 winters now, granite enduring what flesh couldn't. Annie placed fresh wildflowers while the twins ran around chasing butterflies. Little Tobias picked at grass with intense toddler focus. Kate and Jim stood hand in hand watching their children play in the space where violence had once ruled. 5 years, Kate said softly. Feels like yesterday and forever ago simultaneously. Do you think he'd be proud? I know he would. Jim pulled her close. 4 children, thriving homestead, you saving lives weekly. Annie teaching the next generation. This is exactly what he wanted. For us to live. Really live. They stood in comfortable silence. Below them the cabin glowed warm in evening light. Smoke from the chimney. Sounds of children's laughter. All the signs of life continuing despite everything. "Papa," Annie called up. "The twins want to know about the time Grandpa Toby faced down 12 outlaws single-handed." Jim laughed. "That story gets bigger every telling." "But it's true, right?" Annie's face was serious. "Parts of it." "Which parts?" "The parts about courage. About standing for what's right, even when you're terrified. About protecting family, no matter the cost. Those parts are true." Annie nodded satisfied. ran back to her siblings to tell them edited versions of stories too violent for young ears, but too important not to share. As twilight deepened, Jim spoke to the gravestone. Regular habit now, not morbid, just connection. We did it, Toby. Everything you asked. I married her. We've got children. The cabin's full of life. Annie's growing into someone remarkable, strong and kind and brave like you taught her. He paused. I miss you every day, but I'm grateful for everything you gave us. For every lesson, every sacrifice. You saved us. Not just from bullets, from ourselves, from loneliness, from slow death by grief. Kate added her voice. Thank you for my family, for giving Jim permission to love again, for teaching Annie courage, for standing between danger and innocence. You're the reason we're all here. They stood a moment longer. Then Kate said, We should head back, getting cold. But Jim lingered. One more thing to say. I'll teach them, Toby, everything you taught me. The twins, little Tobias, all the children to come. Your wisdom won't die. I promise you that. The wind rustled through grass, warm spring wind carrying the scent of growing things. New life pushing through old death. Wyoming at its most honest. Hard and beautiful and utterly unforgiving to those who couldn't find reasons to endure. But the Holloways had found their reasons, had built them from scratch and blood and sacrifice, had created something that would outlast stone and memory, a legacy not of land, but of love, not of wealth, but of wisdom passed down through generations. As they walked down the hill toward home, Annie slipped her hand into Jim's. On his other side, Kate held Tobias, while the twins ran ahead playing some game only they understood. Papa, Annie asked, when I have children, will you tell them about Grandpa Toby? Every chance I get. And about Mama Abigail, her too, and Dr. Thornton, everyone who made us possible. That's a lot of people. It is. We're built on the shoulders of giants, Annie. Never forget that. I won't. They reached the cabin. Warmth and light spilling out the door. Dinner waiting. Family gathered. All the small miracles that made life worth the cost of living it. Inside, they settled around the table. Jim said grace, thanking God for food and family, and the ones who weren't here, but never really left. The children ate with the enthusiasm of youth. Kate smiled across the table at her husband. 5 years married, and still discovering new reasons to be grateful. After dinner, Annie helped clean, while the twins played with wooden toys Jim carved on winter nights. Little Tobias fell asleep in Kate's arms, peaceful and secure. The cabin filled with the sounds of home. Dishes clattering, children laughing, the crackle of fire in the hearth. Jim stood at the window watching darkness settle over their land. 40 acres they owned free and clear, 160 acres total of Wyoming territory. Small piece of an infinite world, but theirs completely permanently. What are you thinking? Kate asked, coming to stand beside him. About how close we came to losing all this. How many times death nearly won. But it didn't. No. Because of Toby. Because of you. Because somehow in the middle of winter and violence and grief, we found each other. He turned to her. I love you more than I thought possible. More than words can hold. I love you too. You and Annie and all of this. She gestured at their children, their home, their life. I was running from death when I stumbled into your fence line. But I found life instead. Found home. Found family. They kissed. Gentle. Comfortable. The kiss of partners who'd survived hell together and came out stronger. Annie appeared beside them. Time for bed. Past time, Jim said. Get your brothers and sister ready. I'll be up to say good night. She herded the twins toward the loft with practiced efficiency. 13 years old and already half raising them. Jim made a note to thank her properly later, to remind her that childhood mattered too, that she didn't have to be adult yet. After the children were settled and prayers said and final requests for water handled, Jim and Kate sat by the dying fire. Their time. The hour when the house was theirs alone. Toby would be insufferable about this, Jim said suddenly. 4 children in 5 years. He'd make endless jokes about me making up for lost time. Kate laughed. He'd probably also have advice about raising them. 17 rules for proper child rearing or some such. All of them contradicting each other, but all of them somehow right. They smiled, remembering. The old man had been gone 5 years, but his presence still filled this cabin. In the watch Jim carried. In the skills Annie demonstrated. In the courage they all drew on when things got hard. "Do you think he knew?" Kate asked. "When he charged out that night, did he know he was giving us a chance at this?" He knew. Toby always knew. That's what made him remarkable. He could see the shape of things, could calculate odds and costs, and decide what price was worth paying. And we were worth it. Apparently so. Kate leaned against him. "I'll spend my whole life trying to deserve that sacrifice." "You already do. Every life you save, every patient you treat, you're honoring him. We all are. By living fully instead of safely. By choosing courage over comfort. By building family from strangers and calling it home." They sat in peaceful silence. 5 years of marriage behind them. Decades more ahead, if luck and health held. 4 children already. More probably coming if Kate's fertility kept its current pace. A medical practice growing, land producing, community built. The story that began with a blizzard and a dying woman had become something nobody could have predicted. Tragedy transformed into triumph. Grief alchemized into joy. Death creating space for abundant life. But their peace was about to be tested again. The knock came at 10 o'clock. Hard. Urgent. Not the polite tap of a neighbor. Jim's hand moved to his rifle. 5 years of peace, but frontier instincts never died. "Who is it?" "Captain Hayes Holloway, open up." Jim recognized the voice. Opened the door fast. Hayes stood there with 3 soldiers, all looking grim. "What's wrong?" "Nathan Garrett escaped custody 2 days ago. Broke out during transfer to territorial prison. We think he's headed this way." Kate's face went white. He testified. "Why would he come back?" "Revenge, ma'am. His brothers are dead because of that testimony. He blames you. Blames all of you." Jim's mind raced. "He knows where we live. That's why we're here, to warn you and offer protection. How many men you got?" "6 counting me. More coming from Fort Laramie, but they're 2 days out." "Not enough if he brings help." Hayes nodded grimly. "We think he might. Word is he hooked up with some of his brother's old associates. Maybe 4 or 5 men total." Annie appeared at the top of the loft ladder, eyes wide. She'd heard everything. "Papa?" "It's all right, sweetheart. Go back to bed." But it wasn't all right. They both knew it. Kate stood. "We can't fight another siege, not with 4 children in the house." "Then we don't stay here," Jim said. "We go to town, Fort Laramie. Safety in numbers." "Storm's coming," Hayes said. "Weather Service predicts heavy snow by morning. You leave now, you might make it. Wait till dawn, you'll be trapped." Jim looked at Kate. At Annie. At the home they'd built. "Pack essentials. 5 minutes. We ride for the fort." The family moved with practiced efficiency. 5 years of frontier life had taught them how to evacuate fast. Kate grabbed medical supplies, Jim ammunition and food. Annie helped dress the twins, keeping them calm, even though her hands shook. Within 10 minutes, they were mounted. 2 wagons, Hayes's soldiers flanking them, heading east through the darkness toward Fort Laramie, 20 miles away. The temperature was dropping fast. Wind picking up. First snowflakes starting to fall. They'd made it 5 miles when Annie's whistle blew. 2 sharp blasts. "Riders behind us," she called. Hayes turned in his saddle. "How many?" "Can't tell in the dark. Maybe 4, maybe more." "Faster!" Jim shouted. "We need to make the fort." But the wagons couldn't outrun horses. The gap was closing. "We're not going to make it," Hayes said. "Need to find cover, make a stand." "There," Jim pointed. "Old Miller homestead mile ahead. Abandoned, but walls are stone. Defensible. They pushed the horses hard. Behind them, the riders gained. Kate could see them now through the falling snow. 5 men. Armed. Coming fast. They reached the abandoned homestead with minutes to spare. Stone cabin roof partially collapsed, but walls solid. Barn still standing. Wagons inside the barn, Hayes ordered. Women and children in the cabin. Men take positions. They moved fast. Military precision despite civilian clothes. Kate got the children into the cabin, Annie helping keeping the twins quiet, holding little Tobias. Jim and Hayes positioned soldiers at windows. 4 rifles plus Jim's. 5 against 5. Worse odds than last time, because now they had children to protect, limited ammunition, and no Toby. The riders stopped 100 yards out, just visible through the snow. One rode forward alone. Stopped 50 yards out. Called out. "Holloway, I know you're in there." Nathan Garrett, voice older, harder, but unmistakable. "I got nothing to say to you, Garrett." "You got everything to say? You killed my brothers, destroyed my family. Your brothers murdered innocent people, you chose to ride with them. I was 19, scared, you promised me mercy. I gave you mercy, you're alive, your brothers aren't. Alive in prison, ain't living, you ruined my life." Jim was quiet for a moment, then spoke, voice carrying clear through the snow. "You ruined your own life when you helped murder Dr. Thornton, when you helped hunt an innocent woman. You made your choices, now you live with them." "No," Nathan's voice cracked. "Now you die with them." Gunfire erupted. Windows shattered. Kate threw herself over the children, covering them with her body. Jim returned fire. Hayes and the soldiers did the same, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. One soldier went down, shot through the shoulder. Kate crawled to him, started treating the wound even as bullets flew overhead. "Mama," Abigail was crying. "It's all right, baby. We're going to be fine." But Kate didn't know if that was true. The firefight lasted 20 minutes. Both sides burning through ammunition. Then silence. "Holloway," Nathan called. "I got a proposition. I'm listening. You and me. Just us one-on-one. You win my men right away. I win, they kill everyone in that cabin." "Don't do it," Hayes hissed. "It's a trap." But Jim looked at Kate, at his children, at the wounded soldier bleeding on the floor. "I accept." "Papa, no." Annie's voice broke. Jim knelt before her, took her hands. "Remember what Grandpa Toby taught you. Sometimes a man has to stand alone, but he's never really alone if he's standing for family." He kissed her forehead, kissed the twins, kissed little Tobias, kissed Kate long and deep. "I love you, all of you. If this goes wrong—" "It won't," Kate said fiercely. "You promised Toby you'd live. You promised me you'd come back. Keep your promises, James Holloway." He smiled. "Yes, ma'am." Jim walked out into the snow, rifle in hand, facing Nathan Garrett across 50 yards of white death. "Just you and me," Jim said. "Your word they ride away if I win. My word. Then let's finish this." They stood facing each other. 2 men. 2 different choices. 2 different paths that had led to this moment. "You could have let me go that day at the station," Nathan said. "Could have killed me clean. Instead, you made me testify. Made me betray everyone I knew. 5 years in prison, Holloway. 5 years of hell. You murdered a federal doctor. I didn't pull the trigger. You helped. You chose. I was scared. So was Dr. Thornton when your brother shot him. So was Kate when she ran through the blizzard. So was my daughter during the siege. Fear don't excuse murder." Nathan's hand moved toward his gun. "Then I guess we're both choosing today." "I guess we are." They drew simultaneously. 2 guns, 2 shots, 2 men gambling everything on speed and accuracy. Jim's bullet caught Nathan in the chest. Center mass. Clean. Nathan's bullet caught Jim in the side, spinning him, dropping him to his knees. Nathan fell backward, hit the snow, didn't move. "Papa!" Annie was running before anyone could stop her, Kate right behind her. They reached Jim as his men surrounded them. Nathan's riders, true to their word, were already mounting up, riding away into the storm. Mercenaries, not family. No reason to die for a dead man's revenge. Kate knelt beside Jim, hands already checking the wound. "How bad?" "Bad enough." Blood was spreading across his shirt. "But I've had worse." "Don't you dare die on me, James Holloway. Don't you dare." "Not planning to." He gripped her hand. "Made promises. Intend to keep them." Hayes helped them get Jim back inside. Kate worked with frantic efficiency, all her medical training focused on saving her husband. The bullet had gone through clean, missed vital organs, bleeding heavy but controllable. "You're going to live," she said, more to herself than him. "Told you." Annie held his other hand, tears streaming down her face. "You scared me, Papa." "Scared myself, sweetheart." The twins and little Tobias crowded close, needing to touch him to confirm he was real and alive. "Everyone's safe?" Jim asked. "Everyone's safe," Kate confirmed. "Thanks to you." The storm raged outside, but inside the abandoned Miller homestead, the Holloway family held together, wounded but whole, tested but unbroken. Hayes sent riders to Fort Laramie for help. Reinforcements arrived by dawn. Doctor came by noon. Confirmed Kate's work had saved Jim's life. They stayed at the fort a week while Jim recovered, then returned home to find their cabin untouched. Snow had covered everything in peaceful white, erasing the violence, giving them a fresh start. Jim healed slowly. Kate tended him with fierce devotion. Annie helped with her siblings. The community rallied around them. 3 months later, Jim could ride again. 6 months later, he was back to full work. And through it all, they kept their promises to Toby. They lived. Really lived. Not just survived. They visited his grave more often now. Told him about Nathan's attack. About Jim's recovery. About the new baby that came in August, a girl they named Rebecca. 5 children now. A full house. A loud house. A happy house. The inheritance of wolves had been transformed into something beautiful. Something that would endure. Love. Family. Legacy. And every Sunday without fail, they walked that hill. Placed flowers. Told stories. Made sure the next generation knew the man who'd given everything so they could have anything. Tobias McCrae. Teacher. Friend. Hero. Gone but never forgotten. His wisdom living on in the hearts and hands and courage of the family he'd saved. 10 years passed like water through open fingers. December 1886. Christmas Eve again. The 10th anniversary of the night Kate Brennan stumbled into Jim Holloway's life and changed everything. Annie was 23 now, married to Samuel Cooper's son Daniel, living on their own homestead 5 miles north. They'd given Jim and Kate their first grandchild last spring, a boy named Tobias Daniel, carrying forward the legacy in his very name. The twins Thomas and Abigail were 14, nearly grown, already talking about their own futures. Thomas wanted to be a doctor, like Dr. Thornton had been. Abigail wanted to teach to pass knowledge forward, like Annie had taught her. Little Tobias, who wasn't so little anymore at 12, worked the ranch alongside his father with a dedication that reminded Jim of himself at that age. Rebecca was 10, quiet and thoughtful, always reading, always asking questions about the people who'd come before. And there were 2 more now. Margaret, 7, named for Jim's first wife, because Kate had insisted saying the past deserved honor, not erasure, and Samuel, 5, named for the man who'd saved them all. 7 children total. The cabin had expanded twice more to hold them all. The homestead covered 200 acres, now purchased land added to the original patent. Kate's clinic saw patients from 3 counties. She'd trained 2 younger nurses who worked alongside her. Dr. Thornton's legacy living on in every life she saved. Jim was 46 now, gray at the temples, lines deeper around his eyes but strong. Happy. living the life Toby had commanded him to live. This morning the whole family gathered in the main room. All 7 children, plus Annie and Daniel, with baby Tobias, plus Hank and his wife Ruth, plus Nathaniel and Samuel Cooper with their families. 23 people crammed into the Holloway home for Christmas Eve dinner. Loud, chaotic, perfect. Jim stood at the head of the table, Kate beside him, looking out at the family they'd built. 10 years ago tonight, he began, and everyone quieted. They knew this story, had heard it every Christmas Eve for a decade, but they never tired of it. 10 years ago tonight, the worst blizzard I'd ever seen was burying this ranch. I was alone with Annie, checking fence lines, preparing to be trapped inside for days. He looked at Kate. And I found a woman dying in the snow, stranger, running from killers. Every practical bone in my body said leave her. Too dangerous. Too complicated. But I couldn't. Kate took his hand. And I woke up in warmth, in safety, with a man who'd saved my life without asking why I needed saving. With a little girl who looked at me like maybe I was an answer to prayer. Annie spoke next, bouncing baby Tobias on her hip. I remember thinking Mama Kate was an angel. Papa said she was just a woman who got lost. But I was right. She was an angel. Just the human kind. The kind that bleed and hurt and make mistakes, Kate added. But try anyway. Jim continued the story. Told of Toby arriving with wisdom and warnings. Of the Garrett brothers hunting Kate. Of the siege. Of neighbors rallying. Of an old man's sacrifice. The children had heard it before, but they leaned forward anyway, because some stories bore repeating. Some truths needed annual remembering. Grandpa Toby died so we could live, Thomas said. 14 years old, an understanding weight of sacrifice. He chose us even though we weren't his blood. That's the point, Jim said. Family isn't blood, it's choice. Toby chose us, Kate chose us. We chose each other. And that choice echoes forward into all of you, into your children, into generations we'll never meet. Rebecca raised her hand like she was in school. Papa, do you still miss him? Every day, sweetheart, every single day. But you're not sad anymore. Jim smiled. No, not sad. Grateful. There's a difference. After dinner, after the dishes were cleared and the younger children put to bed, the adults gathered by the fire. Annual tradition. The quiet hour when they could talk about things too heavy for young ears. I got a letter last week, Kate said. She pulled it from her pocket. From the Territorial Medical Board. They want to recognize Dr. Thornton posthumously. Name a hospital ward after him in Cheyenne. He'd hate that, Jim said. He would. All that attention. But it's deserved. Hank spoke up. Toby would hate the attention too, but he'd be proud of what you built here, all of it. We built it, Jim corrected. All of us. You and your boys standing with us. Ruth teaching Kate midwifery. This whole community choosing to be community instead of just neighbors. Daniel, Annie's husband, cleared his throat. I never met Colonel McCrae. Died before I was old enough to remember. But I know him through the stories. Through the watch you gave me when I married Annie. He pulled it from his pocket. Toby's watch, passed down as promised. Worn smooth by 3 generations now. He's in this, Daniel said. In the weight of it. In the responsibility. Annie told me what you said when you gave it to me. Protect her, or answer to the people engraved inside. I think about that every day. Jim's eyes burned. You're doing him proud. We all are, Kate said. She stood moved to the window. Snow was falling outside. Gentle this time. Beautiful. Not the killer storm of 10 years ago. I've been thinking, she said, about legacy, about what we leave behind. You leave behind lives saved, Jim said. Hundreds of them. We leave behind children taught to be brave, Annie added. To stand for what's right, to choose family. We leave behind land cultivated, Thomas said. Food grown, Community built. Stories told, Rebecca added quietly. Memories kept alive. Kate turned from the window. I want to do something more, something permanent. What are you thinking? Jim asked. A school. Here on our land, free for any child who wants to learn. We've got the space, we've got the resources, and we've got the reason. She looked at Jim. Toby believed education was inheritance, knowledge was wealth. I want to make that real. Jim stood, walked to her, took her hands. Then we'll do it. It'll cost money, time, energy. We've got all three, and more importantly, we've got purpose. The room erupted in agreement. Hank offered lumber. Nathaniel and Samuel offered labor. Annie offered to teach. Ruth offered to help with curriculum. Within 20 minutes, they'd planned the entire project. The McCrae School, opening next fall. Free education for every child within riding distance. Toby would love this, Jim said. Absolutely love this. That night, after everyone had gone home or gone to bed, Jim and Kate walked to Toby's grave. Annual pilgrimage. Christmas Eve tradition. Just the two of them, and the man who'd made everything possible. The gravestone stood solid against falling snow. Fresh flowers placed earlier by Annie. Candle burning in a glass jar protected from wind. We're building a school in your name, Kate told the stone. Going to teach children that courage can be learned, that family can be chosen, that sacrifice creates ripples that never end. Jim added his voice. 10 years old, friend. 10 years of living like you told me to. Really living, not just surviving. He pulled out the pocket watch, opened it. The engraved names caught firelight. Your legacy doesn't end. It grows. Daniel carries this watch now, teaches his son about the man who wore it, and that boy will teach his children. Your wisdom going forward forever passed from hand to hand, heart to heart. Kate leaned against Jim. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd left me in the snow that night? Never, because I didn't, couldn't. Some things aren't choices, they're callings. You saved my life. You saved mine right back, reminded me what living felt like, what hope felt like, what love could be after loss. They stood in comfortable silence, snow falling gentle around them, wind carrying no menace tonight. Just peace. I'm pregnant again, Kate said suddenly. Jim turned to her, surprise and joy warring on his face. Again, Kate, we've got 7 already. I know, but apparently life keeps insisting. Baby number 8 coming next summer. He laughed, started quiet, then grew until he was shaking with it. Toby would never let me hear the end of this. He'd say you're making up for lost time. He'd say I'm trying to populate the entire territory single-handed. Kate smiled. Maybe we are. Maybe that's the point. Life winning, love multiplying, death defeated not by violence, but by abundance. Then let's keep winning. They kissed in the snow beside the grave of a man who'd given them permission to live fully, who'd shown them that the best revenge against darkness was building light. The years continued their march. The McCrae School opened in fall of 1887 to 23 students. By 1890, it served 60 children from 4 counties. Annie taught reading and writing. Thomas, preparing for medical school, taught basic science. Abigail taught mathematics. Kate taught practical nursing skills to older girls. The Holloway homestead became a center of learning and healing and community building. Jim and Kate's 8th child arrived in summer of 1887. Another boy. They named him Amos for Dr. Thornton. Full circle. All the debts acknowledged. All the sacrifices honored. By 1895, Jim was 55, Kate 46. Their children were grown, or nearly so. Annie had 4 children now. Thomas had graduated medical school and opened a practice in Cheyenne. Abigail married a teacher and moved to Denver. The younger 5 still lived at home, but Rebecca was courting a rancher's son, Margaret was teaching at the McCrae School, Samuel was learning ranch management. 8 children total, and now grandchildren multiplying faster than Jim could count. The homestead thrived. The school thrived. The community thrived. And every Christmas Eve, without fail, the family gathered. Told the story. Walked to Toby's grave. Remembered. December 1895. Christmas Eve. 19th anniversary. Jim stood at Toby's grave with Kate beside him, their 8 children around them. Grandchildren playing in the snow below. 19 years, Jim said. 19 years since you gave us time, gave us life, gave us permission to build something beautiful from ashes. He looked at his family, at the legacy spreading out before him like branches from a single tree. We did it, old friend, everything you asked and more. We lived, we loved, we taught the next generation what you taught us, and they're teaching the ones after. Your wisdom won't die, can't die, because we won't let it. Kate added, the McCrae School has taught 300 children now. 300 minds shaped by your belief that knowledge is inheritance. 300 hearts learning courage. 300 futures built on the foundation you laid. Thomas spoke doctor now, following in Dr. Thornton's footsteps. I save lives because you saved ours. Every patient I treat carries forward what you started. Annie held her youngest child, a daughter named Catherine, after Kate. I teach my children what you taught me. That family is choice. That courage is fear walking forward. That the best of us leave pieces behind in changed hearts. One by one the children spoke. The grandchildren too, the older ones who could understand. Each voice adding to the chorus. Each testimony building the monument. Not of stone, but of lives lived well. Lessons learned and passed forward. Love multiplying across generations. As twilight deepened, Jim pulled out Toby's watch. Daniel had returned it to him last year, saying it belonged with Jim until Jim's own grandson was old enough to carry it forward. He opened it. The names inside had been added to. His children's names now, his grandchildren's names. This watch has seen 3 generations, Jim said. My father's father, my father, me, Daniel, and someday, little Tobias Daniel. Each carrier learning the same lesson. Protect what matters. Stand for what's right. Choose family over everything. He closed it, held it up. Toby, this is your immortality. Not in metal and gears, in the hearts you changed. The courage you inspired. The family you saved and enabled to grow. You're not gone. You're here. In every one of us. The wind whispered through the grass, warm for December, gentle, carrying the scent of home fires and hope. Kate took Jim's hand. We should head back, dinner's waiting. But Jim lingered. One more moment, one more thing to say. Thank you, he whispered to the gravestone, to the man who'd been more than friend, more than mentor, father in every way that mattered. Thank you for teaching me that grief doesn't have to be the end, that love can be found again, that the worst nights give way to the best mornings. Thank you for standing between death and my family. Thank you for the time you bought us. We've spent it well, I promise you that. As they walked down the hill, the whole family together, Jim looked back once. The gravestone stood silhouette against the sunset, solid, permanent, watching over them as it had for 19 years. Rebecca walked beside him. 24 now, married, expecting her first child. Papa, will you tell my baby about Grandpa Toby? Every chance I get. Good, because the story can't end. It has to keep going, from you to me, to my children to theirs, forever. That's the point, sweetheart. Stories don't end. They echo, they ripple, they transform, but they endure. They reached the cabin, now massive, 3 times its original size, built to hold abundance, built to celebrate life winning. Inside, warmth waited, food waited, family waited, all the small miracles and large ones that made up a life well lived. Jim stood in the doorway, looking back at the hill where Toby rested. Where Abigail rested beside him, now moved there 5 years ago so she could be part of this place, this legacy, this family she'd started. Two graves, two people who'd given Jim everything, who'd shaped him into the man he'd become. "I love you both," he said softly. "Always have, always will. Thank you for the time we had. Thank you for the children. Thank you for teaching me that love doesn't divide, it multiplies." Kate appeared beside him, took his hand, still beautiful, still strong, still the woman who'd stumbled out of a blizzard and into his life and refused to leave. "You all right?" she asked. "Better than all right. Happy. Really, truly happy." "Good. Because you promised Toby you'd live fully. And you have. We have." They turned together, walked inside, closed the door on the cold. Inside, chaos waited. Good chaos. Living chaos. 8 children and their spouses and their children filling every corner with noise and love and life. Jim stood in the center of it all, watching his family, and felt Toby's presence like a warm hand on his shoulder. Approving, proud, at peace. The blizzard that had tried to kill them had delivered exactly what they'd needed: each other. Purpose, family, hope. And from that frozen Christmas Eve had grown something that would outlast them all. Something built not on blood, but on choice. Not on obligation, but on love. Not on survival, but on the fierce determination to really live. The inheritance of wolves had been transformed into the legacy of courage, of standing together, of refusing to let darkness win. And it would continue, through children and grandchildren and generations yet unborn, through the McCrae School, through lives saved and lessons taught and stories told. Tobias McCrae had died buying them time. And they'd spent that time building something eternal. Not monuments of stone, but monuments of heart. Not wealth measured in gold, but wealth measured in changed lives, and multiplied love and wisdom passed forward like sacred fire from one generation to the next. Jim pulled Kate close, kissed her forehead, and looked around at their family. This was victory. This was triumph. This was everything worth fighting for, and everything worth dying to protect. And somewhere on a hill overlooking their land, an old soldier's bones rested easy, knowing his sacrifice had not been in vain. Knowing that the family he'd saved had become the legacy he'd built. Knowing that in the end, love had won, and would keep winning forever and ever as long as there were people brave enough to choose it.